The Agenda with Michael Knight on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.com.
11 past the hour, 1 o'clock. The show called The Agenda begins. Like it does every day at this time, we meet our very special guest, retiring Douglas County Sheriff Harvey Gjesdal. Sheriff Gjesdal, you were going to retire at a certain time, but you changed your mind, and that's something we're all able to do, change our mind. Was it the right thing to do?
It is the right thing to do. It was a hard decision for me to decide not to run again, because after this many years, law enforcement, being a professional lawman, is just that's who I am. But then as time has gone on, and I've always told people I'm not going to quit working, I'm just getting out of law enforcement and starting a new career. And so as I start looking down the road towards what I'm going to do next, I realize that I'm not 100% in my moment as being sheriff. And, this county has treated me so well. I think that the sheriff needs to be 100% looking down the road, law enforcement, and in the moment being law enforcement. So, it's what's best for my team. I feel it's what's best for the citizens, so that's what I'm going to do.
You can't be sheriff and a lame dunk at the same time, right? You just can't.
No, you can't. Although I was kind of teasing with a couple of my folks a while back, and I said, I'm not a lame duck now. I'm dangerous.
All lame ducks are dangerous.
Right. Anyway.
Finally you start, but at this time in your career, lame ducks get to be honest. They get to say what they want, and they get to, some cases, do what they want. If you enjoyed that freedom?
It's a little bit liberating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing off the charts or anything, but you tend not to. I tend to think that there's a lot of good in just saying what you think.
So when you announced that you weren't going to run, you said you were going to fill out your term.
Yes.
And then this week you changed your mind about when you were going to resign.
Right.
And tell us what those dates are going to be.
Well, I'm going to officially be out of the office on June 30th of 2018.
Is that okay with everyone over in East Wenatchee and Douglas County?
Oh, I think so. I mean, they understand kind of where you're at after a long career like this, and I'd like to think they could put themselves in my shoes.
How many years in law enforcement?
33.
That's a magic number.
Actually, will be 33 and 3 months on that day.
All the Masons out there are saying, yeah, big number.
Yeah, right.
Well, are the people that you're leaving behind going to fill in the gaps and feel comfortable in doing it? Just so the people of Douglas County know.
This is another thing, too. We have succession management. So if for some reason there's the head of the agency goes away or resigns or retires like I am, someone else is going to step in, and it will be seamless. So the citizens can expect that, the great service that we always strive to provide is still going to be there. The way it works, is on the next day after I retire, the Board of Commissioners will want to appoint an interim sheriff. And that is probably going to be Kevin Morris. That's been my strong recommendation. And then on the next month after I retire, I believe it's the first Board of Commissioners meeting, the local party, because sheriff's a partisan position, I'm a Republican, the local party will make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners of several people who they would like to be sheriff. And the commissioners will pick one person, and then that person will effectively become the sheriff until the end of this term. At that time, he'll have to run for election.
Oh, so, okay, I didn't expect that. I thought the undersheriff would take it to the end of your term. But
no, it was more complicated than that.
So once again, when you retire, what's the process?
They'll select an interim sheriff. My second in command will step up and fill in until they can find someone to appoint to be the sheriff.
Now, there are a number of people running for that office.
There's two, yeah.
And so the interim sheriff will not be one of those two.
Yes, he will.
It will. It could be one of those two.
Well, my undersheriff, Kevin Morris, is running against another fellow. Kevin, as my second in command, will step in to be the interim, I suspect. That's up to the Board of Commissioners, though.
So the Board of Commissioners could choose someone not on that list. I mean, ostensibly, it would be within their legal right to do so.
Yes, it would.
Okay. And by choosing one of the two that's running for office, would they feel that they would lend their support to someone who hasn't been elected?
That I don't know. I don't know.
I just wonder how they would think about it if it's only going to be someone for for how long?
Yeah. That would be a question to ask them, but that's probably one of those subjective things that you have to wrap your mind around. So, yeah, I don't know.
So what's the worst thing about not being sheriff anymore? You don't know yet, right?
It's just what I said earlier. It's not just being the sheriff. It's just being in law enforcement. It's your persona.
Yeah.
I do know for sure that best advice I got from people who have retired is you got to do something. Otherwise, you
do not sit around.
You ruminate over, oh my gosh, I'm not in law enforcement anymore. And I'm sure there's other professions that are that way too. Where you start living your job. But law enforcement is sure one of the bigger ones in that sense.
2 warnings. Don't watch SportsCenter during the day, okay? That's a bad sign, because then you'll discover that Law and Order's on all day, too. Now you've got the couch as your new office.
I will take that under advisement.
And you're in big trouble.
Exactly.
When you know when Law and Order's on all day long, you're in big trouble.
Have binge watching, right?
Yeah, well, of course, if you're with them, you're making arrests and you're giving them advice on prosecution.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the Memorial Day that was just passed was a busy one for the actual sheriff of Douglas County, namely you. It was a busy time, wasn't it?
It was busy. And just for grins today, I asked one of the gals at my office to run some stats for me. And between 2017 and 2018, comparing those 2 years, and just calls for service, it was up 18%. DUI arrests were up 150% from last year. And boating or marine enforcement actions, tickets, went up 300%. Now, having said that, don't be alarmed by the last 2 because the numbers are relatively small, but it's still quite a boost from what we had at the same time last year. But
I heard numbers too from Brian Burnett on the Chelan side. They had a lot of responses around Chelan County.
Oh yeah.
It was I didn't think it was anything special. I thought it was a quiet time, but apparently around Lake Chelan it was a boisterous time.
Yeah, I went up there Friday night, and it was busy. There's kind of the carnival type of event going on there. I mean, not quite that wild, but a lot of people having fun. The weather was decent, which was good. It's good for business.
So DUI arrests up 150% might make some people shake their head, but the actual numbers were not that alarming.
The actual numbers were not that high, but it's still projects good work or good light on the guys who are out there doing the work, which I appreciate that. And with stuff like that, every person that's creates a risk for the public, you get them off the road even overnight. You've done a service.
So that's some cop talk that we can say we did. We covered the bases on that one. We'll come back to some cop talk, but you must be thinking about the future.
I am.
And what's the future tell you that you should be doing?
Well, I have options. I have a lot of energy left that I need to spend before I slow down. As you know, I was in the service for quite a few years, and I always thought it would be nice to help my fellow veterans. And there are jobs in the VA and the Washington Department of Veterans Affairs that might come available. And so I think I would use my energy to pursue that. I mean, I've had to deal with the VA quite a bit, and it's a huge bureaucracy. And God bless them, they do a lot, but it can also challenge you to have to deal with that.
So do you yourself as a go-between between the VA and the individual veteran who's seeking help?
I think I could do that, yeah. With the background that I have in the military and knowing what I know about that organization, I think I'm trainable.
Maybe they should be too. What do you know about the VA that tells you that you can actually work with them? Because they become intractable sometimes.
You know what? My experience with all the people at the VA, and we have our own little VA clinic down here, is they're good. They're good people wanting to help veterans. A lot of them are veterans. But I feel like the organization is just so huge and so hard to move that, it's possible anybody might get frustrated and a little bit jaded by that. But I think the people that work at the VA are generally good. It's just a huge organization.
And does it vary from place to place? Like the VA here might be better than the VA that we hear so much about in Arizona that seems non-functional?
Oh, the VA here is, but it's a small office. Again, when you're dealing with nurses and doctors that you recognize when you walk in, it's going to be better. But the huge VAs, Spokane, Seattle, what was the one you just said?
Well, there's one in Arizona that's rather infamous for not functioning.
Yeah.
On the state level.
Yeah, that I can see why that would be difficult.
What is it about a veteran who returns to work, returns to his family, returns to his home county, and can't assimilate? Doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't tell anybody. He's different. He's not the way he was when he left. But he's home now, and yet he's not really here. How do you crack that veteran's persona, that cover that he has that keeps him protected?
I think it's like anybody else that's being challenged by any one problem. I think bonding with other people who've had your similar experience is a big help. I think if you need it, getting professional help. When I was overseas, I didn't have any experiences like some of the Marines or the combat troops had. I was very lucky about that. But I think it's just a matter of again, bonding with people who know what you've been through. If you need to, you get professional help, because every minute you lose is a minute that you're never going to get back. And you've got to get back on track for your family, for yourself. I want to be part of that.
There was a time in my father's generation, World War II veterans, there was a whole nation of veterans who didn't want to talk about their service. A slight exaggeration, but for the most part, these were men who did not tell you what they did, where they were, and what life was like. Now, there's the television version where the guy brings out these pictures and tells you what a great time he had on Guadalcanal. But for the most part, the Marines that fought in the Pacific and people who spent a lot of time in Europe had nothing to say about World War II. And the reason for that was that when they were sent home, they were left to their own devices to reacquaint themselves with real life, and it wasn't easy.
It doesn't seem like there was much of a recognition that returning servicemen and women, had these burdens on their shoulders and a lot of bad stuff cluttering their minds. I guess we had too much bravado to recognize that. But the good news for veterans now is that we do recognize it.
Indeed.
And I think I'm even going to say the VA, a lot of places and different organizations are taking a very proactive approach at trying to reach out to these people and bring them in to help with, ease whatever problems that they brought back from the war.
Are you going to leave police work behind for good, for sure?
Yeah, I think so.
It's time.
It's time.
You thought about teaching, you thought about media, you thought about a number of other things. Of course, I made you think about the media.
You did. Remember that.
But what made you think that this was the direction to go? What was it that spoke to your heart saying, this looks right?
I can't put my finger on it, but I've had people that have retired before me who just use my same phrase, and it's worn out now. You just know. And they also say that the day you take your badge and your uniform off, you've lived it, but you've loved it, but you don't mind leaving it behind. That's what I'm hoping for.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
Because we can call it duty, but it's more than that, because duty is something that you accept, but the responsibility that goes on top of duty to an entire county, that doesn't sleep, does it?
Yeah. You know what?
How often do they wake you up in the middle of the night?
Not so much anymore. Seriously. When I first got promoted to sergeant, when I first got elected, I suppose the troops were looking for direction, looking to see what the sheriff wanted. I got called quite a bit. I was glad to be called. I was glad to be counted on. But honestly, I was such the creme de la creme of staff right now. It usually doesn't reach me unless it's something really titanic. So, I'm proud of that.
Memorial Day on the river was a different type of Memorial Day. It shows us that your responsibilities aren't just in drunk driving and crowd control. Strange things happen on the water when the water's cold and the water's high, and it's a big holiday.
Yeah, it is. And your listeners probably know we've already had 2 drownings over at Banks Lake. One of my guys went over and helped with one of them. But the water's treacherous. And, again, I love people coming here to recreate. It's a good place. It's a good community. But you got to respect it. And all it takes is one little slip of caution, and you wind up in a bad spot, possibly getting killed. So
the part that's hard to believe is some of these drownings are within sight of the boat.
Yeah, they are.
Drinking, partying into the river or into the lake, into the cold water, and they can't even make it back to the boat. That shows you how treacherous the temperature of the water is.
It's been several years ago, but we had a family here from the Tri-Cities, and the male part of the family was a bow rider, I guess. And somehow, and they weren't going fast or anything, but he slipped off the bow, and the poor fellow just never came up. I love the water. I was a lifeguard in another life, but you got to respect it, and that's we push education quite a bit when we're out in the water. We do vessel inspections so people know what they're supposed to have on their boat, particularly safety items, life jackets, fire extinguishers, stuff like that. And, if we have to do some enforcement, then, yeah, you get a ticket, and you can get arrested for boating under the influence.
What are you going to do in your first day as a civilian?
Clean my garage.
Clean your garage?
Yep.
Okay, that's something that's
what, Michael?
Has that been on your list for a long time?
Here's the thing. My garage is like a pierced ear. If you leave your car out too long, it's going to fill in. I want to get away from those close margins. So, yeah, I'm going to clean my garage. It's a simple dream, but it's the dream of mine.
But are you going to throw away any of that stuff, Sheriff, or are you just going to rearrange it?
I'm going to move my piles to different places.
Okay. We're talking with the Sheriff of Douglas County, Harvey Gjesdal. We'll be back in one moment.
You're listening to The Agenda on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.
Lease deal. For all Toyota offers, see your Toyota dealer or go to buyatoyota.com. Toyota, let's go places.
It's 127 in News Radio 560 KPQ. Michael Knight with my special guest, retiring Douglas County Sheriff Harvey Gjesdal, who has revealed to us that he's about to retire earlier than before. Why don't you tell us one more time, Sheriff, about your final date and your plans for the transfer of power?
On June 30th, that'll be my last day in the office. At that time, our Board of Commissioners will appoint a transitional sheriff, transitional sheriff. And I'm hoping it'll be Kevin Morse, my undersheriff, because the transition will be seamless. He knows what to do. And then the first month after I leave, the commissioners will have a meeting, and the party, of course, I'm a Republican, will bring forward some recommendations for the commissioners, and they will choose from those people, and that person will then become the sheriff.
How many recommendations, how many names will be on that list, do you believe?
I believe 2.
Okay.
So, small list.
And then on the first day of your freedom, you will be cleaning your garage, if anyone needs you.
You know, it would have been cooler to say ziplining or skydiving, but I'm going to clean my garage.
That's Harvey Gjesdal, the retiring sheriff.